Have you heard someone say Christianity is basically emotional blackmail? God says, love me or else, believe or be punished. That accusation gets thrown around a lot, especially online. And honestly, if that's what Christianity actually taught, I'd reject it too. So today, we're going to slow this down and ask a better question. Is God really an extortionist? Or is something much deeper and much more logical going on? Let's start with something Christianity claims that most people gloss over. The Bible doesn't say God has love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. It says God is love and all the rest of those things. These things don't sit on a shelf somewhere in heaven. They flow out of who God is, which means God isn't just a moral lawgiver. He's the source of everything that makes life good. And that matters, because if you misunderstand that, you'll misunderstand hell, judgment, and freedom. So let me give you an analogy. Imagine existence like a house built in Antarctica. Now, no metaphor or analogy is perfect when it comes to God, but we're going to try this one out. Outside that house, it is lethal cold. Life is impossible there without intervention. Now, imagine the house has two rooms. The first room contains the only heat source, not one of many, the only one. That room has full access to the heat it produces. It's warm, it's livable, it's where life can flourish. The second room has no heat source, and not only that, it has no access to the heat coming from the first room. No vents, no leaks, no borrowed warmth, and here's the key. The second room isn't artificially made colder, it simply reflects the natural temperature of Antarctica. Now, no one is forced into that cold room. The door isn't locked behind them. The heat isn't turned off out of anger. But the heat source cannot warm a room where it is absent and inaccessible. The cold room isn't cold because the heater is cruel. It's cold because the heater isn't there. That's the difference between punishment and reality. When people accuse God of extortion, they imagine him saying, do what I say, or I'll take good things away from you. But Christianity says something very different. God says, I am the source of those good things. Life apart from me will necessarily lack them. That's not a threat. That's an explanation of how reality works. And people push back here and say, well, didn't God design the house? Yes, and that matters. God didn't create the cold. Antarctica was already cold. God introduced heat into a hostile environment. Life is a gift. Warmth is not owed. The second room isn't a trap. It's the boundary of life apart from the source. Because if God were morally required to make the second room warm without the heat source, then warmth would exist independently of the heater. Love, joy, peace, goodness, they'd exist apart from God. And at that point, God wouldn't be God anymore. People also say, but don't people who reject God still experience good things? Yes, for now. That's what theologians call common grace. As long as the door is open, some warmth is felt in both rooms. That's mercy, not entitlement. But once access to the source is finally and freely rejected, only the natural environment remains. Hell isn't God angrily turning off the heat. Hell is existence where the source of life and access to it is absent. And here's the part people don't like, but need to hear. Freedom doesn't mean consequence-free choices. Gravity isn't coercive. Fire isn't extortion. Oxygen dependency isn't manipulation. Reality is not coercive either. It's consistent. You can reject the source. You can reject access to the source, but you cannot reject the consequences of doing so. And someone always asks, why doesn't God just force everyone to stay in the warm room? Because forced proximity isn't love. A heaven where no one can refuse God wouldn't be loving. It would be controlled. Love requires the possibility of refusal, and refusal has consequences that cannot be wished away. But here's what separates Christianity from every caricature of it. God doesn't stand comfortably in the warm room yelling instructions. He enters the cold room. The incarnation is God stepping into the place of absence. The cross is God absorbing the cost of exposure. The resurrection is the door standing open. The warmth isn't hoarded, it's offered at great personal cost. So no, God isn't an extortionist. He isn't withholding warmth as leverage. He is the warmth. And separation from him is simply what the cold feels like. If this episode helped you see God a little more clearly or helped untangle a question you've been carrying, I'd love for you to do a few simple things. First, like, share, or subscribe to the podcast. Those small actions really do help this conversation reach people who are quietly wrestling with the same questions. Second, if this episode made you think of someone, a friend, a family member, a coworker, send it to them. Sometimes clarity is a gift we give, not an argument we win. And finally, if you want to go deeper, you can find the full written version of this episode on my Substack. Just search my name or check the link in the show notes. That's where a lot of this thinking gets worked out on the page. This is It Makes Sense, where we explore how the Christian worldview makes the most sense of life in the universe. Thanks for listening, and God bless.